everyone, and welcome back to my yearly roundup of all the weird news that has happened in 2024. I'm back today with a few more weird tales from the year just past. This isn't your usual news roundup, this is strictly the stuff that makes you go, "What?" As quite frankly, the regular news is far too depressing and genuinely terrifying. So instead, we'll be exploring a few lighter, weird and wonderful stories that may have not made it into the regular newspaper during 2024. Now that's not to say that these stories don't dally with the dark side, because they most definitely do. But there's also some light-hearted strangeness too. But don't worry, if anything is going to be hideously awful, then I'll give you a heads up first. So with the disclaimer out of the way, let's jump into November. Before we kick off today's stories, if you are new here, then hi, my name's Nikki, and I make podcasts, YouTube videos and TikToks about all sorts of weird stuff. So if you're into that, which I have a sneaking suspicion that you might be, then please hit subscribe so we can hang out together again. And if you're not new here, then welcome back, old fiend. Nice to see you again. Now, this series takes a lot of planning and effort to produce, and it's just me making everything. So if you fancy supporting what I make to help me create this series and beyond, then please check out my Patreon at patreon.com/Macabre London for lots of bonus content. Now, let's get into the episode. In November 2024, 3 people were arrested for allegedly defrauding a vehicle insurance company to the tune of over $140,000. The separate claims had been submitted, but all with the same reason: bear attacks on their respective vehicles. The 4 suspects, who ranged between 26 years old and 39, first brought suspicion on themselves when the California Department of Insurance thought there may have been some dodgy dealings going on. The first claim, which drew suspicion that not all may be as it seemed, was made in January, when a bear was recorded entering the claimant's 2010 Rolls-Royce. The area the car was in San Bernardino, is reportedly a black bear hotspot, and when the animal entered the vehicle, it caused damage to the vehicle's interior with scratch marks and rips in the leather seats. With clear video footage of the bear rolling about in the car, the insurance company couldn't refute the evidence. But after several rewatches of the footage, it became clear that this bear didn't quite move in the way they expected, and so the insurance company began investigating. After looking back through the files, it didn't take long to track down 2 other claims which had been made for different vehicles, and it turned out that they'd also been submitted because of a run-in with a bear. These claims also had video evidence attached, and after sending them to a biologist from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, they confirmed the insurance company's suspicions. These were videos of a person in a bear costume. After obtaining a search warrant, officers went to the registered address of the claimant with the intention of seeing if they could find a costume, and it didn't take long until they found it in the California residence. The officers found a lifelike-looking bear outfit which matched the same hide colour as the bear in the videos, and along with it were some bear claw-shaped meat shredders, which are usually used for tearing apart barbecue food. With all the tools assembled to carry out the alleged crimes, 4 arrests were made, and at this time the case is with the San Bernardino County District Attorney's Office, pending review. So with the suspected insurance fraudsters having been caught after their repeated antics, it would seem they will now have to be very careful about how they defend themselves in court, or else they could find themselves having to hibernate behind bars. you've been around here for a while, you'll know that on a previous episode of Macabre Mini Mysteries, I covered the mystery of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse, the case in which 3 lighthouse keepers disappeared completely without a trace and have never been heard from ever since. If you've not consumed that episode yet, I'll leave a link to it, and I'd love it if you go and give it a watch or a listen after you've consumed this one. Since learning all about lighthouses dotted around Scotland and the vital life-saving services they still provide, many of them now automated, I've been weirdly fascinated by them ever since. I think it's the combination of the eerie isolation, being at the mercy of the sea in all weathers, and then the intense time spent with just 1 or 2 other people. It's a strange job, but someone has to do it. So when I discovered a story in November which would provide a real-life glimpse into the lives of the Lighthouse men, I knew it would be going straight on the list for this series. When engineers were carrying out maintenance on the Corsewall Point Lighthouse in Stranraer, they discovered something which was just slightly out of reach in the walls of the lighthouse. Behind one of the tower's panels sat a clear glass bottle with a cork stopper in it, and inside was a handwritten note. As the bottle was slightly out of reach for the engineers, they fashioned a knotted rope to place around the neck of the bottle and to pull it up. When they did manage to get it out, they knew this had been left deliberately in the hope someone years down the line would find it, and they were chuffed to bits to be the ones who'd discovered it. The lighthouse keeper, Barry Miller, was phoned instantly by the engineers as he was off in Stranraer getting supplies. He was delighted and intrigued by the find and asked the 2 men to wait for him to come back before they did anything else. Rushing back to the lighthouse, Barry and the 2 engineers took the bottle to a table and placed a towel underneath it and tried to get the note out. Due to the fact the bottle had been there for over 100 years, meant that the note, which had been tightly rolled to once fit in the bottle, had unfurled, which made it very tricky to remove. Now, of course, with the bottle having found its way into the capable hands of engineers, a bit of physics wasn't going to stop them, but not wanting to smash the bottle as it was antique, they fashioned 2 bits of strong wire together so they could grab the note safely and pull it out. Once they did, the note revealed its secrets. Do you want to know what it said? Of course you do. It said, "Get you nosy bugger." Just kidding, it didn't. It read, "This lantern was erected by James Wells, engineer, John Westwood, millwright, James Brodie, engineer, David Scott, labourer, of the firm of James Mill and Son Engineers, Milton Houseworks, Edinburgh, during the months from May to September and relighted on Thursday night, 15th of September 1892. The following being keepers at the station at this time: John Wilson, principal, John B. Henderson, first assistant, John Lockhart, second assistant. The lens and machine being supplied by James Dove & Co. Engineers, Greenside, Edinburgh, and erected by William Burness, John Harrower, James Dodds, engineers with the above firm. So the note was left to commemorate the 5-ton lens from the lantern, which was installed in 1892, and which the lighthouse still uses to this day. A huge feat of engineering in the past, and would still be impressive in this day and age. Barry and the Engineers, which is a great band name by the way, were overjoyed to have found something left to them from their predecessors, and they even tracked down the photos of the keepers from the time to put faces with names and to link them all together. Barry, who incidentally seems like the kindest man on earth, said when holding the bottle that he could almost feel the presence of the people who had left it there. The letter has now been preserved and will go on display in the lighthouse itself, which incidentally is a hotel and restaurant, so if you ever find yourself in the borders, you can go and see it for yourself. I've already looked it up myself and the place looks lovely, and I hope I get to stay there at some point in my life because that would be a dream. So the next time you're doing renovations in your home, perhaps think about leaving behind something for the future residents to find, because just like Barry and his engineers, you might just make their year. On October the 25th, 2024, 4 astronauts, 3 Americans and 1 Russian, were plucked out of the Gulf of Mexico when they returned to Earth and had a successful splashdown in the ocean. The astronauts had been suspended, floating about in orbit aboard the International Space Station for 235 days. However, just 30 minutes after their return to Earth, the cosmonauts and the astronauts were all sent to a hospital in Pensacola. NASA said the space professionals had been sent to the Ascension Sacred Heart Hospital in Pensacola out of an abundance of caution. And so, therein lies the mystery. 3 of the astronauts were released after a few hours, but one, whose identity hasn't been revealed, was detained overnight but released the following day. Now, of course, NASA has every right to medical privacy, but when you've spent over 7 months in space, which the general public had paid for, and on return you're suddenly whisked away to the hospital, of course people are going to ask questions. Michael Barrett, the pilot of the crew and a medical doctor himself, addressed the issue at a press conference, saying spaceflight is still something we don't fully understand. We're finding things that we don't expect sometimes. This was one of those times. He promised the story might come out in the fullness of time, which is NASA speak for we'll tell you when we're ready, but not a second sooner. Now, 235 days floating in orbit will do bizarre things to the human body. Bones will thin, muscles will waste away, and fluids shift around, so much so that your face can look permanently puffy. Even simple things like sitting in a hard chair become torture, as Commander Matthew Dominic hilariously pointed out after returning home. He said, "You expect to feel dizzy and disorientated, but my backside that hadn't sat on a surface in over 7 months, I couldn't take it." Now imagine the reconditioning process of readjusting to Earth. Except add in whatever mysterious reason sent them to the hospital. NASA has been tight-lipped, but here's where it gets even more interesting. The crew wasn't supposed to be up there that long in the first place. Initially, their return was delayed by 2 months because of technical issues with Boeing's ill-fated Starliner Capsule. And then you may remember, just a minor inconvenience named Milton came along, the huge hurricane which caused devastation in Florida and the surrounding area, all of which made it too dangerous to splash down. So there they were, waiting, stranded in space, for almost 2 months longer than they originally anticipated, and 55 days longer than the recommended time they should have been on the station in the first place. Now, of course, you can't be that mysterious and expect people to not speculate, so rumours on the internet ran wild. Theories from extreme muscle fatigue and malnutrition floated around, as did ideas about a space-borne virus which had mutated in the confines of the space station, which was why they had to leave 2 astronauts behind in space. And yes, that's right, still currently, there are 2 astronauts still up there waiting to be rescued by SpaceX and Boeing, and NASA have been arguing the toss of who's going to get them back safely. They're currently set to return sometime in early 2025. For now, the crew are reportedly fine and getting back to their normal lives here on Earth. As for what really happened, well, maybe NASA will one day tell us the secret. But until then, we have to wait patiently, just like the astronauts in orbit. Selection of weird stories. I hope you enjoyed them, and if you did, there'll be more along soon, so make sure you're subscribed or following if you're not already to keep up with the series. Now, just a couple of housekeeping things, because this is the last episode before Christmas, and the finale of the Weird News Roundup will be out on New Year's Eve on the 31st of December, so we can do some resolution setting together and go through all the predictions from last year and see if I got anything right and if Baba Vanga and Nostradamus were spot on or not. So make sure you join me on the 31st for that one. If you like the show and what I make in general and want it to continue, then please consider becoming a Patreon supporter like our executive Patreon producers, Christina, Christoph, Heather's Leg, Lisa, Mary, Ravel, Sally, Sam, Sarah, Terry and Veronica, and all of our other patrons too. Now is the best time to sign up to the Patreon if you're new, as there's a Christmas and New Year discount on for the next month only, so make sure you check it out. There'll be lots of new bonus content coming up there, and you also get access to my other podcast, Having a Problem, which is very silly, and if you want a taster, there's a couple of free episodes dotted around on the podcast feed already on Patreon, and some 15-minute previews too. which sounds very saucy. I'll also be collating all of the weird news roundup episodes from 2024 into one long episode without adverts and intros and outros on there in the new year too, so you can listen to all of this without interruptions, and starting in 2025, patrons will get access to ad-free episodes as well. If you'd rather just send a tip or a little Christmas gift from my Amazon wishlist, then I would massively appreciate that too, and I'll leave all the links in the show notes in case you want to check them out. And again, thank you. It's been very nice getting surprise parcels and tips coming through. It's incredibly kind and you're the best. I know I said it a lot last year, but it is my dream to make this show my full-time job now, and you don't know how happy it would make me to make content for you full-time as my main purpose in life, and to leave my full-time day job behind to share even more stories with you. So if you're able to help, then it really genuinely does make a difference, and I'll be eternally grateful. How the show grows is really through you, so if you're able to tell just one person about it, send a link to your mates in the group chat, pop up a social media post or share mine around, leaving a like, comment or a review all make an enormous difference. I just think you're great for hanging out with me, and I'd love to maybe do that on a weekly basis, but I can't at the moment as I just don't have the time. So I appreciate any little act of kindness, as little splashes eventually create big waves, and hopefully I'll be able to do this as my job one day. So I just want to wish you a very Merry Christmas to you and yours, and a very happy holidays, whatever you're celebrating. And if you're not celebrating, I'm just sending you plenty of love regardless. Thank you for joining me for this episode. I've been Nikki Druce. Remember to stay spooky, and I'll see you ghouls next time for December.